Hey everybody. If you've been following the news recently, you'd know that over 1,000 journalists, some of which are responsible for much of the provably fake news we've read over the last 5 or so years, have lost their jobs. Many outlets responsible for fake news have had to downsize their companies, including Huffington Post and BuzzFeed, to name a few. Apparently, fake news cannot compete in the free market of ideas. Who knew? Interestingly, shortly thereafter, YouTube updated its content policies. While they paint these policy updates as clarifications, they are in fact new policies, and YouTube pretty much admits this in its Creator Insider video. Also, it's important to note that these new enforcement policies are printed nowhere in their terms of service. So if you've missed this video, there is no way for you to know what these new terms of service are or their far-reaching and draconian implications. This is precisely why I made this video, to warn my fellow content creators and the general public of what's going on, so everyone can think about what to do to protect their free speech rights from totalitarian gatekeepers who are in charge of social media platforms. With that out of the way, let's dive in.
Hello, insiders.
Hello, SJW Asian Pepe. How are you?
Newsflash time. Let's start with community guidelines update. So there's a broad effort going on to prevent abuse on the platform, something that we've always been doing. But one of the things that we're focusing on now is strengthening the enforcement of our community guidelines policies and making sure that enforcement is also more consistent. So one of the things that creators may not immediately realize is that those community guidelines apply to all of the content that you put on the platform. So it's not just your videos, but it's also your thumbnails, links to other sites, and what we want to make sure is that all of that stuff is consistent with the guidelines. So as an example, for a long time, we've prohibited linking to external sites that have pornography or malware. If we detect a outbound link to a site that has that's not consistent with our guidelines, then that will result in the link being removed, but also results in a community guideline strike. And as you may know, after you receive a certain number of strikes, your channel could be terminated. So you really want to be careful about where you link to from your videos. So next.
All right, let's talk about that for a moment, because I think that is actually terrifying. Okay? Links will be removed. If YouTube doesn't like the website that you link to, or the video that you link to, or the source that you link to, it will remove the link. And in addition to that, YouTube will give community guideline strikes for links to websites and sources they don't like. YouTube can and probably will use this to censor conservative media, which they've provably done in the past. One example is removing InfoWars from their platform, which is a direct attack on the American Fourth Estate, American journalism, and the Americans' First Amendment rights to free speech. In addition to this, their removal of InfoWars from their platform was censorship on an ideological basis. Other content creators, such as PragerU, have shown that both Google and YouTube have censored content for ideological reasons in the past, not for content violations. Now, YouTube can use this new enforcement policy, which, by the way, I need to reiterate, is printed nowhere on its policy website, to discredit content creators. In other words, content creators can put links to sources in the descriptions of their videos, like I do and many other people do, and YouTube can just remove them, costing the content creator credibility because their viewers can't find their sources. So one of the things that I'm going to be doing for every one of my YouTube videos from now on, in addition to mirroring that content on BitChute, I'm actually going to be linking all of my sources on my minds.com account, which, by the way, there is a link to in the channel description of my channel. So if you can't find a source to my video that I cite within the video, and if for some reason YouTube removed that link, you can always find it on my minds.com account, which, by the way, I encourage everybody to go ahead and check out. A little bit of a hashtag shill alert. But the thing that's more troubling is this. If YouTube doesn't like your source material, okay, they don't like the website that you post up, they can give you a community guidelines strike. And that's extremely important because, again, they could remove your link, give you a strike for ideological reasons, and they could take down your video. Now, studies have shown that big tech, specifically YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook, they control about 80% of online speech. This is extremely important to Americans, which is why the United States Supreme Court in 2017 said that social media platforms are the digital online public square and deserve free speech rights and protections. So think about that for a moment. Now, the other thing is that when YouTube does this, in other words, for YouTube to remove links, they might remove links to their competitors. Now, what this could do is potentially open up YouTube to valid antitrust allegations. Because if you've been watching any of my content for any length of time, you'll know that I've done videos where I demonstrate big tech CEOs collaborate with one another. And I'm going to go into that a little bit later in this video. All right, let's move forward.
On that topic, another example is that for a long time, we've also rejected custom thumbnails that violate the community guidelines. So what typically happens is if we detect that the thumbnail is not consistent with those guidelines, we will reject that thumbnail. If we see repeat offenses from the same channel, we will then often remove the privilege of being able to use custom thumbnails for some period of time. And then if we see repeated violations beyond that or egregious violations, it could also result in a channel termination. So be really careful about your custom thumbnails, especially like an egregious violation would be if it included pornography in it. But that's the most egregious. There's also like other types of thumbnails that are not approved or characteristics that are not approved. And I'll link below for the specific community guidelines.
He actually doesn't do that. I actually looked at the link below in the description. He actually didn't do that. He actually linked to the strike policy, which doesn't include any of the things that he's just said. Now, if anybody from Creator Insider actually is watching this video, I understand that might have just been an oversight, but the link that was actually in the description of the video is not what he just said it is. So I would encourage you guys at YouTube to update your link to provide the actual information that was just provided. And if you don't currently have a support page that does that, then I would encourage you to create one. You know, YouTube and Google always talk about how they're transparent. This is one of the areas in which they're not, with the exception of this particular video. And in order to be transparent is to let people know exactly what's going on. So we're going to move on.
One other quick point I would make is not only should you be mindful of your thumbnails to make sure that it's consistent with the community guidelines, but it's also a really important thing to help your videos get discovered.
All right, before we jump into discovery, let's talk about custom thumbnails, okay? If they don't like your thumbnail, they will remove it. And again, YouTube has already admitted to targeting individuals based on ideological bias rather than content violation. Now, the other concern that I have about this is that they talk about channel termination, and it's going to get a little bit more draconian very shortly. Here we go.
Because what you want is a thumbnail that will represent the content, but also be appealing to viewers.
All right, so what he's talking about here is he says that basically your thumbnail will affect discoverability because, you know, you need to have an engaging thumbnail. And I agree with that. But here he actually goes on to say what he actually means.
And not only will we remove the thumbnail if we find the thumbnail is outside the guidelines that we provide for the community guidelines, but if we find that the thumbnail is misleading, it also gets recommended less. So your kind of ideal spot is you've got a thumbnail that's appealing, but it's also accurate and representative of the content.
All right. So let's talk about that for a moment. What he's saying is that YouTube will actually partially shadow ban and censor viewers' ability to find your video. Now, I recently did a video on Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi, and basically it asks and answers the question, did she violate her oath of office? I put a picture of Nancy Pelosi up in the thumbnail, and I put the enemy of the American people or something along those lines. According to at least 3 of my viewers, this particular video was not even listed in my channel. So this wasn't even a discoverability issue. This was a flat out censorship issue. Now, this video was monetized. This video did not receive any kind of strikes of any kind. But what happened was that when these viewers went to my channel to look for my video content, it was not there. That video was not there. I have co-hosted episodes of the TFM 420 show where I have gone to the announcement video to grab the articles because I'm participating in the show, and the video is not there for me. And other people have made these complaints with other YouTube content creators as well. This is blatant censorship, and these people have said, look, unless we had actually gotten a link to the video either through gab.ai or minds.com, or they're part of my Discord because they're a patron, they don't know about my videos. Or, if you go to Subscribestar, you go to patreon.com and you go to my pages there, you get links to my videos there. Sometimes it'll be in the recommended, but it won't actually be on my video channel as well, which again, also happened with this most recent video. Now, interestingly enough, this statement also contradicts Sundar Pichai's sworn testimony before Congress, where he states that YouTube does not censor videos that have been accepted by its platform. So I think that this is extremely disturbing for this individual to admit. Let's move on.
And also, for sure, abides by the community guidelines. All right, I digress. So more about the community guidelines. Challenges and pranks. Well, many of us enjoy a good prank video from time to time, but there are types of challenges and prank videos that we won't allow and will remove and issue a strike. And then there are some that we will allow, but we will age restrict who can see it. And we've gotten some feedback from creators, including on Creator Insider, that, hey, can you be a little bit more specific about what you consider harmful and dangerous when it comes to a challenge or a prank? So let me give you some more details that I took some notes from my meeting with the guidelines team.
So here's the thing. This is a concern here. Why would you have to talk about what the guidelines team says? Why not just print the specifics of the guidelines in black and white on your website? Don't be general. Don't be vague. Just do it. It seems pretty simple. If you say that you are a transparent company, this is an easy way to demonstrate that. This is an easy way to use your actions to back up your words. But, I digress. Let's move on.
An example of a challenge that would not be allowed on the platform would be removed and would result in a strike to a channel. If there's a challenge that presents risk of death or features a minor participating and it poses imminent risk of severe injury to that minor, that's just not allowed, period.
All right, let's debunk that right now, okay? This is a TEDx talk. This TEDx talk says pedophilia is a natural sexual orientation, okay? That's the title of the video. Now, obviously, this is a mirror of that original video, but this video exists on YouTube. There are no strikes against it. It was completely allowed, and TEDx or whoever originally put this video up never received a strike for it. So again, if it's harmful to children, he says it's not allowed. We absolutely know right now, today on YouTube, that is not true. Either SJW Asian Pepe is lying to us, or he's just ignorant of what's going on in his own platform. Either way, that's unacceptable. Let's move forward.
Will be removed, will be struck. Here's another example of something that is just not allowed at all. If you have a challenge or a prank that involves an unsuspecting victim believing that they are in physical danger, that's That's not that goes beyond the realm of what's allowed. If the challenge or prank involves real physical harm, results in real physical harm, or involves emotional distress to minors.
In other words, to feminists, because we all know that feminists are mentally unstable. We've seen video after video after video of feminists and social justice warriors on college campuses having absolute mental breakdowns in public, to the point where college campuses are now having on-staff therapists to deal with their college students. They're having therapy dogs, safe spaces, everything else. It's absolutely ridiculous. So, again, don't emotionally upset children, especially if those children are part of YouTube's community guidelines team, whose ideological biases causes them to get triggered. Because if you do that, you're in trouble.
Okay, so those are just not allowed, period.
Oh, and I forgot. This also includes children from the Southern Poverty Law Center, because, they fund the children who are part of the Antifa terrorist organizations that go after people who disagree with them and actually physically assault them, because they can't just have a normal temper tantrum like the SJW mentally unstable college students that are out there. They actually have to go out and try to beat and kill those who disagree with them. That's why they have that whole thing like it's okay to punch a Nazi. And then what they've done is they've labeled everybody who disagrees with them a Nazi, regardless of the color of their skin or where they're from. But again, a little bit of a tangent. Let's move on.
Now, there's other kinds of challenges and pranks that are allowed, but then are age restricted, so they may not be accessible by all YouTube viewers. So what are examples? So if there are adults in a dangerous situation with high risk of injury, that could be age restricted. It may still be allowed, but it might be age restricted. If the primary purpose is educational, scientific, documentary, or art, but it depicts dangerous challenges, that could be age restricted. And in fact, if it's gratuitously graphic, it may not even be allowed. But if it's not gratuitously graphic, and even if its primary purpose is for entertainment, documentary, science, or art, but it depicts dangerous challenges, that could be age restricted.
Okay, so what he's talking about here is he's talking about educators like PragerU. Okay, so in other words, if you make a video that's primary purpose is to protect children from online predators and it disturbs children, that's a problem. If you create a video that depicts the horrors of war because you're a peace activist and you're doing this to educate people, then that is a problem for Google. What they're saying is that all the journalism from Vietnam would probably be age restricted, or those journalists would have been censored, even though, again, hate speech is not legally recognizable in the United States, and we have free speech rights, which is part of the reason these journalists were able to report on the Vietnam War. Yet that doesn't matter to YouTube. So I want you to think about that. Because again, what they're saying is that if you're creating videos to call attention to dangerous situations because you're concerned, like say child predators or people who prey on other people, or people who are trying to indoctrinate people into unhealthy ideologies, not only can those things be age restricted, those things can be removed from the channel and your channel can be shut down. This is extremely important and it is extremely draconian. So think about that for a moment. Now, also, I want you to consider this. Take what he just said and add it to what he said earlier. So not only are they going to remove any information that an educator might be able to provide that may depict a dangerous situation, they will remove links to those educators as well. So in other words, if you have a study that's peer reviewed, if you are quoting a news outlet, if you have a link to academic material that is completely credible, they can remove that link based on what he just said, and they can silence your speech and effectively work to conceal and censor that academic paper. Think about that. That's extremely, extremely disturbing. Let's move on.
One that could be age restricted if it involves a lot of fake blood, gore, gruesome injuries, simulated deaths, where the unsuspecting victim is an adult. That could be age restricted. For some people, they might be thinking, whoa, these are a lot of rules. Like maybe you've been on the platform for a long time and you just weren't aware of these restrictions or these guidelines, or you weren't aware that we enforce it the way we have been or will be even more actively. So during this initial period, since we're just announcing it around now, our bias is going to be just to remove videos and not issue a strike, right away.
Actually, your bias is going to be to remove channels that conflict with your ideological positions on a variety of subjects. And mainstream media has reported this repeatedly, but do go on.
This will give creators a little bit of time to kind of get used to the new enforcement expectations. And if you have a video that was uploaded prior to this announcement, it may still be removed, but we wouldn't issue a strike because maybe I think we're trying to kind of be as gradual and kind of reasonable as we can, so you don't feel like, hey,
That's not true. This is blatantly false. I know that the host of the TFM show and the TFM 420 show, Turd Flinging Monkey, he's actually received community guideline strikes for videos that were 2 years old. I received a guideline strike for a video that was uploaded and available, and it was online for over a year before it was struck down. Many, many other content creators have had their entire channels removed for older videos that didn't violate YouTube's policies. YouTube changed its policies, and then they went and they witch hunted these content creators by going through their older catalogs. What it's like is it's like the community guidelines team. They go online, they search for videos, they search for content creators that they don't like or that they disagree with on ideological grounds. They change their policies so that these videos and these content creators can be disciplined, and then they witch hunt these content creators to remove them from the platform. This is completely unethical, and this is actually what's happening on the ground. Now, I don't know if SJW Asian Pepe understands this, but that's actually what's happening. So let's move on.
I uploaded this thing 2 years ago. It was never a problem, and then all of a sudden I got a strike. But it could still be removed.
See, he even admits it. Let's go back a little bit. Let's see if I can find it here. Hold on.
To kind of be as and not issue a strike,
Hold on. We're going to go back a little farther.
Aware that
here we go.
We enforce it the way we have been or will be even more actively. So during this initial period, since we're just announcing it around now, our bias is going to be just to remove videos and not issue a strike, right away. This will give creators a little bit of time to kind of get used to the new enforcement expectations. And if you have a video that was uploaded prior to this announcement, it may still be removed, but we wouldn't issue a strike because maybe I think we're trying to kind of be as gradual and kind of reasonable as we can, so you don't feel like, hey, I uploaded this thing 2 years ago, it was never a problem, and then all of a sudden I got a strike. But it could still be removed.
All right. So he actually admits what I just said. He admits that people are uploading videos and these videos are 2 and 3 years old and they were getting strikes for them. So he actually admits what I just said, and he actually debunks his previous statement. Let's move on.
If your content is rejected or you do receive a strike, you will always get an email alert, and you'll also see it in your channel settings in Studio. So that's another reason why a lot of creators, the email address that they've given us that's associated with the channel, sometimes it's not an email that they check. Maybe they created it like years ago. So you may want to review that and update your email so that you can get these kinds of important notifications. these decisions, if you feel like, hey, my content was removed or I received a strike, but I read the guidelines and I'm absolutely sure that this meets the community guidelines, you can still appeal it and we will re-review it. But
now, the problem here is that the appeal process is a joke and it is not credible. And let me explain why. Somebody created an app that you can add to as an add-on to your browser so that people can false flag videos in your name. Mass false flagging is a serious problem on YouTube's platform, and it's one that they refuse to address. The second issue is that if somebody wants to flag a video down, and I know because I went through this process to see what are the steps it takes to actually flag a video down. I didn't flag anybody's video, but I just went through it to see what's there. You can add all kinds of information. You can flag comments, you can flag videos, you can flag all sorts of things for all sorts of reasons. There's all sorts of information you can provide. But when you file the appeal against one of these flags, you only get 500 characters or so to do it. Now, what makes this process completely not credible is the fact that if the video is 2 years old, or even if it's new, the video needs 1,000 views in the last 7 days to be eligible for appeal. So let's say your video has 500,000 views and it's 2 years old and you appeal. If it doesn't get 1,000 views over the last 7 days around that appeal, your appeal will be ignored until it gets 1,000 views. And by the way, most videos after 2 years don't get 1,000 views in 7 days. And YouTube knows this. This is completely in bad faith. Now, what makes this process worse is that if you get 3 strikes in, let's say, less than 7 days, you're not going to get those 1,000 views and your channel is going to go down. So in other words, you're not even going to get a valid appeal process because that appeal is impossible. Because that video that got, or those 3 videos that got, let's just say 500,000 views each, they didn't have those 1,000 views within that 7-day period. So no appeal is eligible. So basically it's a big FU to content creators. This is extremely egregious and it destroys the credibility of the entire appeal process. The appeal process, like I said, it doesn't even pass the straight face test. It is a complete joke.
What we recommend is, right now is a great time to review all of your videos, all of your thumbnails, all of your links. Make sure they're kind of tip top, and then you can just avoid any of this affecting you. But hopefully,
so what he's saying is self-censor. That's what he's saying. He's saying self-censor, or we're going to come after you, and there's nothing you can do about it. That's really what he's saying. Go on, SJW Asian Pepe.
The result of this is that the creators that are producing, original content that viewers really like, that's responsible, that's safe, that's appropriate, will get more opportunities, and
That's not true. Because how do we know if viewers like content if YouTube censors it? What if viewers like a particular thumbnail, but YouTube restricts discoverability? Like I've said earlier, I've had videos that were removed from discoverability that were taken off, not because of community guideline violations, but because of ideological issues. Now, even if it's a partial shadow ban, it still limits discoverability. I've had lots of people tell me that my videos are like, look, this video should be watched more. A lot more people need to see this video. And yet YouTube has made it so that when people go to my channel, they don't even know that these videos exist. And I'm not the only person that this is happening to. So it's not like I'm just crying in my beer or whatever to say, oh, woe is me. This is happening to every content creator that opposes social justice, ideological bigotry. And it's a serious issue. And again, this is a problem because YouTube has programmed its algorithms to automatically censor, to automatically demonetize, and to automatically target any video that disagrees with its ideological bias. As we saw, there are pedophiles on YouTube. Google has allowed terrorists on its platform, okay? Take a look at this, okay? This is from The Independent. YouTube under fire after allowing neo-Nazi and Taliban videos found on site despite being flagged, okay? Yes, this is very much unacceptable, but YouTube was allowing it. Now, even worse, new media law states, following the reasoning of several past decisions, a California district court dismissed claims against Google under the Anti-Terrorism Act for allegedly providing material support to ISIS by allowing terrorists to use YouTube as a tool to facilitate recruitment and commit terrorism. The court rejects the plaintiff's arguments, which, by the way, is the United States government, that Google provided the terrorists with material support by allowing them to sign up for accounts or to regenerate shuttered accounts, and then allegedly serve targeted ads alongside such posted videos. It ruled that even careful pleadings cannot change the fact that, in substance, plaintiffs' attempts to hold Google liable as a publisher of the terrorist detestable content was barred by Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. So in other words, what this leftist judge is saying is that if you're a terrorist or you're an extremist and you publish content that is illegal under United States federal law and is an actual crime and commits or promotes terrorism, that's okay. You're protected. YouTube is protected, and YouTube is above the law. So again, this is a problem because they turn around and they say, oh, we remove this content. This is an issue. The only reason they remove this content is because the public spoke out against it. If the public didn't have free speech rights, we would not be able to speak out against this totalitarian regime that big tech has created. They violated federal anti-terrorist laws. This was proved in court and nobody cared. Now, let's move on. This is Sundar Pichai's testimony. And for those of you who don't know, Sundar Pichai is the CEO of Google. He's been CEO for a while, and this testimony was given before Congress under oath. Let's listen to this in pertinent part.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Smith, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, Google has revolutionized the world, though not entirely in the way I expected. Americans deserve the facts objectively reported. The muting of conservative voices by internet platforms has intensified, especially during the presidency of Donald Trump. More than 90% of all internet searches take place on Google or its subsidiary YouTube, and they are curating what we see. Google has long faced criticism for manipulating search results to censor conservatives. Conservative individuals and organizations have had their pro-Trump content tagged as hate speech or had their content reduced in search results. And enforcement of immigration laws has been tagged as hate speech as well. Such actions pose a grave threat to our democratic form of government. BJ Media found that 96% of search results for Trump were from liberal media outlets. In fact, not a single right-leaning site appeared on the first page of search results. This doesn't happen by accident, but is baked into the algorithms. Those who write the algorithms get the results they must want, and apparently management allows it. Dr. Robert Epstein, a Harvard-trained psychologist, authored a study recently that showed Google's bias likely swung 2.6 million votes to Hillary Clinton in the 2016 election. Google could well elect the next president with dire implications for our democracy. This should be of real concern to all but the most politically partisan. Those at the top set the tone. It will require a Herculean effort by the chief executive and senior management to change the political bias now programmed into the company's culture. And Mr. Pichai, let me ask my first question about those examples of political bias that I just mentioned, and you're going to hear others too. In your opening statement, you mentioned your desire to provide information that was without political bias. Clearly, that's not working. So what are you going to improve that situation?
Congressman, thanks for the question. If I may, some of the studies you mentioned, we have investigated those. There are other studies which have looked at it. We have found issues with the methodology and the sample size and so on. But let me step back and say, providing users with high quality, accurate, and trusted information is sacrosanct to us. It's what our principles are, and our business interests, our natural long-term incentives are aligned with that. We want to serve users everywhere, and we need to earn their trust in doing so.
Right. So what actions are you going to take to try to counter the political bias in some of those examples that I just gave? I mean, they're irrefutable. So it occurs, you have to take some responsibility for that bias. What do you intend to do about it?
Congressman, with respect, Dr. Epstein's study, we have investigated. We don't agree with the methodology. Happy to follow up with your office and give.
Okay, so let's talk about that. So Google CEO Sundar Pichai said they found other studies that conflicted with Dr. Epstein's study. But here's the problem with the CEO's statement. Google bribes academics to write positive papers about Google. Let me say it another way, okay? Google bribes academics to author positive position papers on Google. This has been well known for over a year prior to Sundar Pichai's testimony. This article from New York Magazine was published on July 11th, 2017. Okay? This well-established and verifiable fact undermines Google's credibility every time they point to an academic paper that supports their ideological bias. Now, the other thing I want to discuss is this. Now, this is the PJ Media article. This is one of them. Google bias against conservative news is much more dangerous than China's action, expert says. Now, there is also a documentary that recently came out. I'm not going to link to it right now, but the documentary is called The Creepy Line, and it talks about how big tech is basically indoctrinating people and manipulating what they see, what they do, and what they believe. It's an extremely important documentary. I've personally seen it. It's a great documentary. I suggest everybody watch it. But, you know, Dr. Epstein, and this is part of this PJ Media series, Dr. Epstein actually talked about a lot of this, and he conducted massive amounts of studies. These studies are publicly available. You can go find them. But the other concern is this, is that Google and YouTube and big tech are actually removing videos under the pretense that they violate hate speech guidelines. And many of these videos that they remove are from Americans. Here's the problem. Hate speech in the United States is not legally recognized. The United States Supreme Court has repeatedly ruled that hate speech is legally protected free speech under the First Amendment. The most recent Supreme Court case on this issue was in 2007, which, by the way, talked about how social media platforms are digital online public squares worthy of free speech protections. I have talked about this case numerous times in prior videos. It is Packingham versus North Carolina. Now, moving on. When the justices unanimously reaffirmed that there is effectively no hate speech exception to free speech rights protected under the First Amendment. Now, in addition to that, PragerU agrees with this position. PragerU has actually sued Google in federal court for discrimination. They state, in correspondence citing the filing, Google YouTube made it clear that the censorship of certain videos was because they were deemed inappropriate for younger audiences. Watch any one of our videos and you'll immediately realize that Google YouTube censorship is entirely ideologically driven. For the record, our videos are presented by some of the finest minds in the Western world, including 4 Pulitzer Prize winners, former prime ministers, and professors from the most prestigious universities in America, stated PragerU founder Dennis Prager. Prager added, they are engaging in an arbitrary and capricious use of their restricted mode and demonetization to restrict non-left political thought. Their censorship is profoundly damaging because Google and YouTube own and control the largest forum for public participation in video-based speech in not only California, but the United States and the world. This is speech discrimination, plain and simple. Censorship based entirely on unspecified ideological objection to the message or on the perceived identity and political viewpoint of the speaker, said former California Governor Pete Wilson of Brown, George, and Ross. Google and YouTube's use of restricted mode filtering to silence PragerU violates its fundamental First Amendment rights, both under California and United States constitutions. It constitutes unlawful discrimination under California law, is a misleading and unfair business practice, and breaches the warranty of good faith and fair dealing implied in Google and YouTube's own terms of use and community guidelines. This is not a left-right issue. It's a free speech issue, which is why prominent liberals, such as Harvard professor Alan Dershowitz, are supporting our lawsuit, Prager concluded. And I would also add this. By censoring Americans' free speech on YouTube, Google, and any other social media platform, I'm also concerned that this is national origin discrimination. So now let's switch gears to something just as important, just as relevant, but on a slightly different track. China has started ranking citizens with a creepy social credit system. Here's what you can do wrong and the embarrassing, demeaning ways they can punish you. The Chinese state is setting up a vast ranking system that will monitor the behavior of its enormous population and rank them all based on their social credit. The social credit system, first announced in 2014, aims to reinforce the idea that keeping trust is glorious and breaking trust is disgraceful, according to a government document. I kind of agree with that, but the problem is that big tech platforms have lost the trust of the American people. Now, obviously in China, it might be a little bit different. I'm only speaking from a United States/American perspective, since I am a U.S. citizen. The program is due to be fully operational nationwide by 2020. But it's being piloted for millions of people across the country already. The scheme will be mandatory. Now, they can use this social credit system to get you banned from flying or catching a train. They can use it to slow your internet speeds. They can ban you or your kids from the best schools. They can prevent you from getting a job. They can keep you out of the best hotels. They can even get your dog taken away. They can publicly name you as a bad citizen, similar to what the Southern Poverty Law Center does right now. Now, they also admit that a prototype blacklist already exists and has been used to punish people. And this is actually true because Google is basically using a version of Dragonfly on the American people. Alex Jones actually spoke out against this, which is why big tech got together and collectively banned him from all their platforms and all their payment processors that were affiliated with these platforms. Now, in addition to that, according to The Intercept, Google is facing a new campaign of global protests over its plan to launch a censored version of its new search engine in China. On Friday, a coalition of Chinese, Tibetan, Uyghur, and human rights groups organized demonstrations outside of Google's office in the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, India, Mexico, Chile, Argentina, Sweden, Switzerland, and Denmark. Google designated the Chinese search engine, codenamed Dragonfly, to blacklist information about human rights, democracy, religion, peaceful protest, in accordance with strict rules on censorship in China that are enforced by the country's authoritarian Communist Party government. Interestingly enough, like I previously said, and I accused Google of doing this in the United States, we're seeing censorship of right-wing outlets who speak about human rights, democracy, religion, and peaceful protest. We see this already. This blacklist is already happening and it's already been implemented in the Western world, specifically United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, and parts of Europe. Moving on. In December, The Intercept revealed that an internal dispute had forced Google to shut down a data analysis system that it was using to develop the search engine. This had effectively ended the project, sources said, because the company's engineers no longer had the tools they need to build it. But Google bosses have not publicly stated they will cease development of Dragonfly. That's because it's still in development. Google should be connecting the world through the sharing of information, not facilitating human rights abuses by a repressive government determined to crush all forms of peaceful online dissent, said Gloria Montgomery, director of the Tibet Society UK. Google's directors must urgently take heed to calls from employees and tens of thousands of global citizens demanding that they immediately halt Project Dragonfly. If they don't, Google risks irreversible damage to its reputation. The problem is that I don't see how everyone can call out Google facilitating human rights abuses in China for the same things that it is doing in the United States and not call them human rights abuses in the United States. Again, hate speech is not legally recognizable in the United States. It just doesn't exist. And, the sad part about it is that now CEOs all across big tech are admitting that they're working together to silence free speech. Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey, big tech platforms definitely collaborate on censorship methods. In other words, Google is developing Dragonfly for China, but they're sharing that tech with other big tech companies, Facebook, Twitter, and everybody else who they're friends with. This is frightening and extremely Orwellian. So as you can see, YouTube and other large social media platforms such as Twitter and Facebook are implementing aspects of the Chinese Communist Dragonfly censorship project inside the United States. Now, it's important to reiterate one more time that hate speech is not legally recognizable in the United States, yet that fact doesn't stop Google from restricting free speech on its platforms. Now, I explained Google's position on free speech in my video from December 2018, Google Values Aren't American Values. But even more concerning is Google's collaboration with the Chinese Communist government through their Dragonfly project, which, if anybody's been paying attention, it looks like Google and other big tech companies are beta testing this in the United States and all over the world. But this also raises legitimate concerns because by working for the Chinese Communist government, Google is acting as an arm of the Chinese Communist government, and I explore this in my video, Is Google an Agent of the Chinese Government? However, even more disturbing is Google's advertising business model. In my video, Is Google's Empire Built on Fraud?, I explore the many valid concerns about how Google made its billions of dollars in the first place. And then on top of that, Twitter and Patreon's CEO have both admitted that big tech collaborate to censor content on ideological grounds. While I touched on this briefly in this video, I go into far more detail in my video entitled YouTuber Law, AntiTrust, and Discrimination Against Americans. Links to these videos will be in the description below. Now, if you review these videos and then you watch this video again, you will see a frightening pattern of behavior. Not only on the part of YouTube, but on the part of every big tech social media platform that works in concert with YouTube and Google to silence free speech. I believe that YouTube and other social media platforms are ramping up their censorship activities to indoctrinate Americans to quit valuing free speech, and I believe these policy updates are in direct response to 1,000 fake news journalists losing their jobs and fake news outlets having to downsize. Big tech totalitarian gatekeepers are both furious and terrified that their false narratives, fake news, and censorship strategies are being flatly rejected by Americans across the board. And it's my view that big tech has gotten together and said, if Americans reject fake news, then big tech will quietly ramp up censorship of real news in retaliation. Make no mistake, Americans are at war, and it's a war to protect Americans' constitutional right to free speech. And if more Americans don't speak out against this soon, we won't have any free speech rights left to defend. I'm DDJ, and this has been your dose of misandry today.